visiting different churches, and he went to this one church, and he was very charismatic. And he had this cord that was hooked up to his microphone. It's not wireless like mine. And so he was walking around, preaching the word, just telling everybody about it, getting pretty excited. And every time he had a turn, he just needed some more cords. So he'd go like this and whip his cord around. And so he was doing that for about 10, 15 minutes. And then a 6-year-old girl over here nudged her mom and said, "Mommy, if he gets loose, will he hurt us?" Life is pretty serendipitous if you recognize it. The title of today's lesson is "The Way We Were," and I chose that a few weeks before I found out that Gregory and Millicent's family was going to be here, so it just kind of happens that way. But life in itself is kind of interesting, because if you remember, you have to remember back a few more years if you're like me than some people. But if you remember when you're really young, you're just a baby, you're just enjoying life and having your caregivers, whether that be your biological parents or whoever that is, just love you and enjoying it. But as you grow a little bit older, you start looking up to people who are a few years older than you, wanting to be like them. And then as you get older in life, regrettably, if you're like me, get to be around 15, 16, you get to start thinking, well, I wonder if I can buy a beer. I wonder if I can get away. I'm wearing boots today. That used to be my trick. When I was raised in Texas, I used to wear boots to make myself taller. When I went in there, I'd say, I'd like a 6-pack. See if I could get in it. But you're looking up to people, and you're looking up to the next age that you get to be able to do something, whatever that is, be able to drive. In my case, I started when I was 13, 14. A lot of people, maybe if you're old enough, you did, but they don't allow that anymore. I guess it's 16 now, right, before you can drive. But that was in a farm, so it's different. But anyway, so you look forward to things like that when you're that age. But then when you get older, you get to my age, sometimes you look back at life, and you start reminiscing about things that has happened in your life, don't you? And it's kind of fun, really, if you, it's already up there. Reminiscing about times gone by with family and friends can be a good time, can it? But it also can be a double-edged sword if we don't watch out. Because sometimes in our mind, we look back at things and whatever the situation was, whatever happened, we are still remembering it today as a bad thing. Has anybody experienced that? Yeah. And if we experience it as a bad thing that happened a long time ago, what's happening to us right now? We're either feeling that same feeling, which we don't need to be experiencing because it's not happening right now, or we're holding on to something that if someone else, which more than likely someone else was involved, it's not bothering them one bit. And who was right, who was wrong makes no difference. If we're still holding on to something like that, then it's going to be bothering us right here, right now. And right here, right now is all we've got, right? Yeah. This is the moment we live in. The Bible looks back at a time when life was much different than today, doesn't it? Yes. A lot different. In fact, that's one of the great things that Jesus taught us when he brought his message to the world, was that, I'm still a Jew. I've always been a Jew, but I got new things for you, new revelations that have happened to me through my meditation, through my understanding, my relationship with God. And I want to tell you about them. And it doesn't include just us Jewish people, although I'm not leaving Jewish people. It doesn't just include us, it includes everybody. Which a lot of people didn't like, didn't they? Hebrew and Christian Bibles are different in many life-changing ways, yet are tied together. I know that everybody knows this here, but I'm going to say it anyway. The Hebrew Bible is the Old Testament, the Christian Bible is the New Testament. And so when, and maybe you don't know this, is that when they were putting together the Christian Bible, when they, a lot of people got together that believed what Jesus' teachings were about, and there were a lot of them, a good percentage of them, that didn't want to tie the two together. Didn't want them together because they said, well, this is Christianity. We don't need to be tied to the Jewish faith, since the Jewish faith, in those people's opinion, was kind of closed off to just Jewish people, right? To the Hebrew people. Well, so those were called the Marcionians, because the Marcion was the guy leading those people. But anyway, those people lost out the vote, or whatever you call about it. So they ended up tying the two Bibles together. which is really great if you think about it. I think it's great to have that history and to tie it together, because that's where Jesus came from, right? So you have to know a little bit of history of what he came from. And if you would know what you do, if you study the New Testament, there's nothing in the New Testament that wasn't in the Old Testament. And people say, oh, how can that be? How can that be? Jesus said all this stuff, and it was new and fresh, and it was new and fresh. But he said it in a way that included more people. Not only that, but he said it more expansive in the love and other things that God was able to give. Jesus was always a Jewish face, and yet many people in Christianity today think of him as a Christian. Well, yeah, he's a Christian, but he never left the Jewish faith. So, I don't know what we would call it, but I wish all of us could get together and call us God people or something. I don't know what you would call it. What would you call it? Anybody got any ideas? What would we call something that we don't believe in just a sect, God's children? Yeah, that's good. Just as, Spirit people. Well, that's cool too. Because sometimes we do live life and we forget about what we really are, don't we? We forget that there's a spirit involved here, which is going to last a lot longer than just our human body, right? Does anybody believe that? Does anybody believe our spirit's going to live on?
Yes. Yes.
I do. I'm getting hot, so I'm going to take off my coat. No, I'm not getting hot, you know what I mean. Temperature-wise. I said that I made a mistake. I apologize for the warmth in this room. Yesterday we had a wedding in here, and we have everything's programmed. So we had yesterday usually isn't a wedding here, so it was hot in here when I came in here for the wedding. So I turned it down and pushed it on hold. I didn't turn it down to what it's supposed to be for Sunday, and I forgot to put it back on run before I left, so I apologize. It's running right now. You can turn it on either way. Doesn't make a difference. Thank you. So I apologize for the warmth in here. So anyway, how we frame our past in our life, though, affects us today. And this isn't only a psychological fact, but it's also something that you've experienced. I know it is. Because of the fact that you have something going on, and y'all getting together at a family reunion, or anytime any of us getting in together at a family reunion, usually there's an Uncle Joe or Uncle whatever, that everybody kind of, and there was one, mine was Uncle Gary, and I wish now, even though I didn't agree with how he chose to live his life, I wish now that, since he's gone, that I could have been more understanding, even though I think I was at the time. You know what I mean? Because it seems like, I hope, for most people, that the old adage, absence makes the heart grow fonder. I hope that when somebody leaves us, makes their transition into another form of life, that we, as a family member or somebody we knew close, that those things that we had disagreements with, those parts of life that we may have had pretty tough struggles with each other, that we just let those go. And we just remember the friendship, the love that we shared. How many people are married? How many people agree with everything that their spouse says? Everybody's, oh, well, you, thank you. Yeah, Francie Rose. Good for you. Right answer. Bill's sitting over here. He works with us during the week, and he knows that's not true. Oh, boy, only if it was. No, it'd be boring if it was, wouldn't it? I mean, that's what some people kind of forget. They look at we kind of get stuck in our humanness about looking at our differences instead of focusing on what we're bringing to life. If God made each one of us as an individual with specific attributes to bring to the community of humanity. And if somebody was the same as me, they're not bringing anything different than me. And so nobody's the same as me. And so each of us contributing, we should look at that as a blessing, whether it is the same thought pattern that we have about a situation or not. I always use the example of, and it's an old example, but we have to look at it in human life too. There are many paths to the mountaintop. And if we're going to all meet at the mountaintop, who cares how somebody came on the mountain from the other side than me? We're going to be there together. And so in unity, we learn how to live that heaven here on earth instead of waiting until we're at the supposed mountaintop, which you can be at during life, but supposed mountaintop when you pass. We all have a cross to bear in life, which we have all had a cross to bear, I would think. I mean, I don't think, you can think of anybody, and I don't want to disparage anybody, but don't take this wrong, but because I loved them too. But there was a mystique for a long time about the Kennedy family, right? The Kennedy family, how they were great, and they did do great things in politics and everything. But if we remember, and I'm forgetting his name right now, the dad, how he made his money.
Joe.
Oh, Joe, it was Joe, you're right.
Yeah.
So how did he make, how did he make his money?
Alcohol.
Bootlegging.
Bootlegging.
Bootlegging. At the time it was illegal.
Yeah.
Right?
Prohibition.
Yeah, prohibition. All that stuff. So, and I told, people, it depends on what situation, and obviously there's another thing in psychology that says it's the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that it is totally true in our human existence. And that means that anybody, no matter what position you are in life, no matter whether you live in a castle and you're protected or whatever, but any of us as a human being can resort to the mob mentality, which means we'd be looking to kill each other. Right? We can. And how does that happen? It's because we start thinking, this is mine and only mine, I've worked hard for it, and it's only mine. But when we do that, which you deserve everything in life, you deserve all the blessings, anything you desire in life. But if we get to the point where we have something and we think that it's limited to that, and it's not an unlimited universe, which it is, then we close our mind up for other people having it. If somebody else gets something, it isn't taken away from you. If somebody else is successful, the majority of the Western society kind of looks at it sometimes and says, oh, how'd he get his money? That's not what we should do. We should celebrate them however they get their money. Or whatever it is, however they get their blessing, and say to ourselves, I deserve some too, and accept your good. God is willing to give each of us everything that we desire, but we can't accept it like this, can we? We can only accept it like this. Each of us has had a cross to bear in our life, but that doesn't mean that we have to continue to carry that cross. We don't. This is one of the Bible quotes that I wanted to use today. It's from Lamentations. It is good for a man that he bear the yoke of his youth. Now, some of y'all have heard this in different forms, but I specifically pulled this one because it's from the Old Testament and it's from the Jewish interpretation of this verse. So this is what they intended for it to say. It is good for a man that he bear the yoke of his youth. So what does that say to us? Well, it's saying we should bear a burden for a while, right? And it's not really saying that, but it is saying that literally. And that's where some of us get in arguments or are in trouble really with our own spiritual growth in taking the Bible literally word for word. It was a spiritual text in both the Hebrew text and the Christian text to uplift your spirit. It's funny when somebody says, I'm going to tell you the gospel today, and then starts saying how you're going to go to hell. What's gospel mean? It means good news. I'm going to hell doesn't sound like good news to me. Lamentation. So this is saying, from their understanding at the time, even though they didn't mean it, that it's good for you to bear your youth. What did it mean? What do you think it meant? I kind of look at it like someone that's lost their way going into the military. I mean, I hope nobody's against the military. But anyway, the military does teach you some certain things. It teaches you how to respect others if you make it through, and teaches you how to have to get along with people that you may not have disagreed or you may have not agreed with in the past. And so for a lot of people, that's a good thing. And so that's what it's kind of talking about. It's kind of talking about, well, sometimes you have to go through and have a burden in life to learn something, whatever you need to learn, to be able to get back on the spiritual path. Because there's a lot of times in our life, in our physical life, that we forget that we've got this spiritual body within us, this spiritual thing within us that can live right now. And how much are we going to express it? Another one on those same lines is this is from Matthew And it says, for my yoke is easy, of course Jesus, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Well, that changed the meaning a little bit, didn't it? For Jesus to say that. It's in direct comparison with the Lamentations quote. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So he said you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that, really. Because people had latched on to that Lamentations quote. Okay? And I'm going to show you why that's important. People had latched on to that, and at the time they were thinking, well, all of us should have the burden. You know, the Jewish people were saying, well, our Savior's going to come. Just wait for him. Keep waiting. We've got to be under this burden. We've got to be under somebody's control because we're waiting for our Savior to come, and he's going to change the world. And it was he only at that time. Since then, though, we've seen that it could be he, she, or whatever, couldn't it? Isn't it? So look at this one. From Leviticus, which is before both. This is right after Exodus. This is before both of those. I am the Lord your God. So this is supposedly God speaking, which brought you forth out of the land of Egypt, that ye should not be their bondmen. And I have broken the bands of your yoke and made you go upright. So before they took on to the Lamentations ones, God already said you don't have to bear a yoke anymore. You don't have to bear a burden anymore. God had already said that. And so Jesus was easily saying, hey, mine's light. It's not heavy at all. And he could revert back to this, couldn't he? How many people have been spiritually inspired at some point, even a second in their life? I hope everybody raises their hand. Come on now. Everybody raise your hand. You're here, so I know you have been. At some point, you had to be spiritually inspired. When you felt that inspiration, you remember how freeing it was for you? Remember how you had nothing bad, thinking about anything bad toward yourself, anybody. Everything was perfect in that moment. This is what we could always have all the time. But it's up to us to release anything that we have toward anybody else. Our human body, as a shape, is limited. Our spiritual body is unlimited. And so which are we going to have take control of our life? Which are we going to have control of our mind? And that's where it starts. Every action begins with a thought, doesn't it? So if we have a thought of hate, what's that going to produce? Hateful action. If we have a thought of love, what's that going to produce? And see, it's interesting because, we learn things when we're kids sometimes that stays with us. But hate by itself, an evil, and this kind of throws people sometimes, evil by itself has no power. There are people that do evil acts, but evil by itself cannot sustain itself. But love can. If you are a person that meets somebody for the first time, you may be a little bit hesitant on your part, but you have hopefully no preconceived notions of that person, and there can be a sense of love between you two. I'm not talking about physical love. I'm talking about love. The Christ in me meets and greets the Christ in you. It can always be there. What burdens from the past or present are we carrying with us today? You don't have to say so. But you know what they are. I know what mine are. I had to release myself from thinking of my Uncle Gary in a negative way, not liking the way he lived, right? I have to release myself from that because obviously it is hurting him as a person because he's not even here anymore as a person. But I guarantee you his spirit is saying, well, what are you doing? Don't hold that against yourself. No matter, even if you don't like somebody and they don't like you, when they become a spirit, it's all back to that all love because they cannot do evil. I had a minister friend that he did a funeral for a guy that was pretty rough. I would say rough around the edges, but it wasn't even just around the edges. He was rough every way. And the few people that came to the funeral listened to the service, and the minister he'd been around a long time, and he had done some, like you should, done some research on the man, and gave a pretty uplifting service. And the few people that were there were uplifted, but one of them came to him afterwards and said, "You really didn't meet this guy, did you?" And you've seen that before. But the minister said, "I didn't have to meet him because I know where he's at right now is pure love." And even though he may not have expressed it, it's been my experience, and I think each of us could agree with this, that anybody that is lashing out is something's going on inside of them. And that's how we have to look at stuff, whether it's our family or anything else. If they're lashing out, something's going on with them. For those of you who don't know, everybody else does, one of my sons has a drug problem. And, he, every once in a while, you get, or at least me, I'll speak for myself, I get enthused, man. He's off of them, and I think he's going to stay off of them. And then, there's a, whatever you call it, relapse. Yeah. And, this last time it wasn't that long between times, but, and I'm not saying you should get hardened by it, but what I'm saying is you still have to, because, it does get old. You do things, and then you think, okay, and you open up, what happens when that happens? You're opening up your heart again, aren't you? And man, you get it slammed shut. But you got to realize that even though it does hurt you as a person, I guess, you can't get tied into holding that person, taking that person's situation on for yourself, because that does him no good. Does him no good at all. And so that's really the difference between having empathy, which is kind of not standoffish, but it's like, here I am, I'll support you in any way, yet I'm not going to take on your burden. You follow me?
Yes.
But sympathy is something different. It's kind of like, I'm taking on your burden, here I am, let's cry together. You can cry together with empathy. I mean, I cried for my son many times. I'm going to go visit him in jail again here this week. And I love him dearly. But, I cannot take on, if I went and did drugs, who's going to help? It's not going to help anybody. It's going to hurt me again more, isn't it? So we got to choose what we're going to keep on. And I hope everybody chooses that they don't have to keep carrying their burden and they can release it. So, which ones can we let go of today? Oh boy, we're having trouble with this? Come on now, I didn't do a very good start. Well, let's start over. Let's change the tape. Hey, Facebook friends. Sometimes it is hard to let go of things, especially if the person's still around, right? It is kind of hard sometimes. But we have at that point, we have to look within ourselves and figure out that, hey, I am a spiritual being. I can rise above anything. I'm not alone. I'm not alone. I have God with me, and God can conquer anything. And I just need to let God take control of this situation. I have not been successful, so I'm going to allow you to do it, God. Reminds me of that sign on the wall. That's okay, God, I got this. And then, what kind of day that guy has. Not too good. No matter where we are in life, we have to remember who's in control. We can't just release, or we can't just get to a point in life and say, I've got this, God. Well, God will let you have it for a little bit. God's always there. It's kind of like me with my son. God's always there, ready to love you, ready to take you back. But, you got to be the one coming. You got to say, okay, let's go hand in hand. So I hope that we can release anything that's bothering us. You don't have, you can have a fresh start with somebody, even if it's a loved one, and not get caught in the stuff that you've maybe gotten caught in before. But if you don't have that fresh start, then you're cutting off your good. You're cutting off your good from that relationship. And if it's a family member like I shared with you today, then that family member's never going away, and I don't want him to go away. So I have to open my heart again and say, you know what? It's okay. As a human being, sometimes we have those heartbreaks. Sometimes they happen. Doesn't mean I'm going to stop loving, right? Because that's a natural thing for us to do.
Right.
How much of our life are we going to allow God to have control over? We just discussed that. Right now, I'd say, what would you say the human society God is in control of? You know, that's another thing about growing up, isn't it? When Walter Cronkite was on the air, and that's the way it is, you know, everything was better, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But it probably wasn't, was it? I bet you our parents and our grandparents were saying the same thing. What are they doing in Washington or wherever? What are they doing? So the best thing for us to do is just, you know what? I'm going to live a life that's full, and I'm going to allow God to be in it. And I'm going to go forward knowing that God is in charge. And I'm going to enjoy the bounty of all the desires that I have, because I'm not taking from anybody. And I want everybody else to have the same thing. And I'll help them along the way as much as they'll allow. But I'm not going to be pounding my head against the wall either, right? Right? I'm not saying that. We're not going to be pounding our head against the wall. The more of our life we partner with God and follow the direction given, the less burdens in our life. And I think each of us have probably experienced that. It looks like all of us are old enough to have done that. So let's join today and let go of all ill thought toward another person or another situation and hand it over to God. Can we do that?
Yes. Yes.
Can we try it at least?
Yes.
All right, good. Let's hear a song then. I appreciate y'all being here today.